Hi all, welcome to continuation of the previous part. Actually, so here we will discuss data models, schemas, and instances. So in the previous part we discussed this data models. Okay, so now let's explore the schema and instances here. So together it completes the topic. It's a subtopic of your module 1, data model, schema and instances. Data model we observed in detail in the last video, different models, and I hope you remember. Now it's time to explore what is schema and instances. So again, certain terminologies we are using. Database schema so it's just a structure, that's all. So in a data model it is important to distinguish between the description of the database and the database itself. Okay, so database is the actual data you are storing, right? And we parallelly have that description, right? The structure information, and that typically we call as a metadata. Hope you remember, and that we will keep in the database catalog. Okay, so we have to be differentiate between these two, because whenever you are adding something new and all, like a new column or something, so you can easily do that by altering that structure. Okay, and accordingly you can populate the data. But if both of them are together, it's not so easy to have changes. Okay, so this separation will help you. The description of the database is what we call as a database schema. So this is something what we kept in the catalog. So this is another technical name that we are giving for the structure. Okay, database schema, so which is specified during database design and is not expected to change frequently. So that is our expectation, like the schema, once you finalize the structure of the database without populating the data. So as of now we just have the structure, like if I have a student database, student name, roll number, these information we are going to keep. So that structure we know, but we don't have any particular detail of the student. So once you started populating the structure with the actual data, we call it as instance of the schema. So that is another terminology. So database schema, that terminology just means the structure. And once you finalize the structure, you are not supposed to change it frequently, so that will create problem. But if needed, we can change it. Okay, so but frequent updates to the schema is not expected. So always, once you have this database schema with you, communicate it with the user. Maybe you can use some data model, and once he is finalized, you can proceed. Okay, so like that, after some filtering and all, we are reaching this database schema finalization, and once it is finalized, we will try not to change it frequently, but sometimes it is needed also. And most data models have certain conventions for displaying schema as a diagram. So typically with the help of some database model, we can express this schema as a schema diagram. Okay, so schema diagram we can use, and we may see like ER model and all, using relational model and all, how the schema diagram can be drawn, that we will see. So the diagram displays the structure of each record type, but not the actual instances of the record. So instances of the record is another terminology, that is actual data once you start populating it. But before that, the schema diagram just displays the structure. So we call each object in the schema, such as student or a course, such as schema construct. Okay, so the schema, that terminology means the entire structure of the database, and within that there will be small some construct, using which the whole schema is created, right? So it can be a student schema, a sub schema construct. Okay, so that is the terminology we are using. So student schema construct could contain details of the student, and course is another schema construct that contains details of the course, maybe faculty profile. Like that, you can have any number of schema construct together. It will form the schema for your organization, maybe a university database, like that. Now what about database instances, and at any time what is its state? The actual data in the database, so definitely it is going to change frequently, right? So you will add information of student. Sometimes when he is taking TC or something, you have to remove it, and once you change his locality and all, you have to update the address information and other performance related information, etc. So that will keep on changing. So the instance is actually the data that we populated over the schema. So schema is a structure, instance is the actual data. So schema is not supposed to change frequently, but instance definitely it will change frequently. The data in the database at a particular moment in time is what we call as a database state. So this data is we call instances, each and every instance, okay, that we are populating in the database. Now at any time, if you are taking a snapshot it, okay, so we can call it as a snapshot or a database state. So that is nothing but the set of all instances or data of the database at any particular moment, okay. So you are just taking a snapshot. So it is also called as a current state of occurrences of the occurrences or instances in the database. So currently these are all the instances, okay. So this is the current set of instances or occurrences. In a given database state, each schema construct has its own current set of instances. So if you are looking at the student construct, it contains a set of individual student entities. So at any time, say how many students are there in the university or in the college, so that may be so after some time it will change and all, okay. So state will keep on changing every time we insert or delete a record or change the value of certain data item in a record. We change the state of the database from the current one to the next one, like that. From one state we are changing to another state. So the at any moment if you are taking a snapshot of the database, is what we call as a current state, and that will keep on changing, okay. So whenever some updates are happening or insert or delete is happening, so accordingly we can think about different states. Or we can think about a state diagram even, okay. The distinction between the database schema and database state is very important, and hope you get an idea like what is schema, what is instant, what is state. These three terminology you should. So they may ask you small, they can frame such questions, just define or differentiate between these two like this. That time you should have a clarity on explaining. So when we define a new database, we specify its schema, database schema only to the DBMS. Oh, no. I mean at the initial point there is only schema or structure, right? And later on you will start filling the data. So at this point, I mean initially when you are having only the structure of the database, the corresponding database state, if somebody is asking, you can say that it is an empty state with no data. So you didn't start filling the database, right? So that state you can call like an empty state because without any data. And then after, once you start filling the data, you will get an initial state of database when the database is very first populated or loaded with some initial set of data. So you got, so from empty state where you are just having the structure, now you moved it to a initial state when you populate the database for the very first time, right? And then after, every time whenever some update operation or insert delete something is happening, is applied to the database, we are changing from one state to another. So that state will keep on changing. At any point, the current state, you can think about the current state. So that will keep on changing. Yeah. So in empty state, initial state, and current state. Hope those terminologies are clear. So these are all very small concepts only. So some terminology we are using, that's all. Now what is valid state, intention and extension? They may ask you, that's why I'm highlighting these terminologies, very basic concepts only, but this terminology should be there in your mind, okay. For that I'm explaining. The DBMS is partly responsible for ensuring that every state of the database is valid state, that is state that satisfies the structure and constraints specified in the schema. Whenever we are having that schema design, we have a structure for the database. Like for example, if it is student database, we know this many fields are to be included, like is name of the student, roll number, maybe grade, like that. So that we are fixing, right? So we are supposed to populate the database only with the data that we are fixing before. Okay, so we have to maintain the structure, and also there will be certain constraints like for a student to I can call a person as a student, maybe a degree course and all, his minimum age should be like that. So like that you can impose, or his 12th pass mark should be this much, then only he is considered for the degree course, like that. So when you are keeping that information, you have to ensure that whether it is keeping that constraints over the data, maybe his Kerala entrance rank and other parameters, okay, so that you have to ensure. Some minimum requirement will be there, right? Normally rank there is no requirement. This pass mark and all, for typically we have a requirement for the engineering courses and all, okay. So that kind of constraints we will be having with the database, that we will define along with the schema design, and that you have to ensure it is maintained, okay. So then only I can call it as a valid state. At any point when you populate the data with some wrong information, definitely it is going to an invalid state, and that time the DBMS software will report an error for you. Okay, so hence specifying a correct schema to the database is extremely important, and the schema must be designed with the utmost care. So it's everything is up to the schema, and later on we are purely working on the schema, right? So the schema design matters a lot. The DBMS stores the description of the schema, construct, and constraints, also called as the metadata. This terminology also you know in the DBMS catalog, so that DBMS software can refer to the schema whenever it needs to. And this you know, I already told you that schema is otherwise called as metadata or the structure, and that we typically store in the catalog. Okay, DBMS catalog. The schema is sometimes called as the intention, and the database state is called extension of schema. So that's all. So intention is the structure. Extension means the structure you populated with the data. Okay, and the schema will change over time, and we are using a terminology called schema evolution for that. Okay, so hope the terminologies are clear. So it's a small lecture. We just introduce some of the terminology like what is schema, what is state of the database, what is instance, right? And the state, different states like empty state, initial state, current state, and valid state. And what is the intention and extension? Intention is a structure, and extension is the database after populating with the data. I mean, having instances. Okay. Thanks for watching.